to Jetta's Craft Cottage. Today we're going to make this hooded baby towel. It takes less than 2 hours to make, but your infant will love it. Let's get started. For this hooded baby towel, you'll need 1 yard of terry cloth or a large bath towel at least 30 inches wide, a ½ yard of cotton fabric, a rotary cutter and a ruler, some binding clips and straight pins, a water erasable marking pen, and a sewing machine. The first thing you're going to do is measure 30 inches on your terry cloth. So I'm going to cut it at that point. Terry cloth does ravel, so you'll see a lot of extra threads. Now I'm going to square up this piece of fabric to 30 inches. So you have a 30 by 30 inch square of terry cloth. I'm going to set that aside. With this extra fabric, I'm going to make a 12-inch square. Now we're going to cut from corner to corner to make 2 triangles. This is enough for 2 hooded towels. I'm going to set this aside. You're going to open your fabric, the cotton fabric, and we're going to cut 12 inches off of one end. And I want to square this up to 12 inches. And we're going to do the same thing like we did with the terry cloth. We're going to go at an angle and make 2 triangles from this square. So you can see that this triangle will fit over this triangle. With your rotary cutter and the ruler, you're going to cut at least 6 strips from the remaining fabric at 2 inches. We're going to start with the binding, and I'm going to have one piece straight up so the right sides are up, and I'm going to take the second one where I'm going to put the right sides down, and I'm going to overlap it just a little bit so that you can see where the edges are. I'll put 1 pin in one side just to secure it, and I have this little tool from Fawns and Porter that is a binding tool, and I'm going to take the triangle part of it, lay that on the flat part of my fabric, and you'll see there's a triangle that goes straight through it, and I'm going to draw my line from corner to corner, and I'm going to add another pin to it. You'll continue this with all your binding strips. Now I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine and sew right down that blue line. I have completed sewing on the line here. Now I'm going to trim it to 1/4 inch, and this little tool also has a nice little guide where I can just trim it to where I want it. I'm going to trim it this way, and if there are any extra little tails on each side, I will cut it off. You'll see when it opens up, it should be pretty much even. And I'm going to take my iron and I'm going to make sure that my seams are open. Now that I've pressed all my seams opened, I'm going to fold over and press this so I have half of it, so you'll see both sides. And I'm going to do that for the whole binding. I have ironed all my bindings, so you can see it's a long strip. We're going to do the hood first, and I want to make sure all this is together. We're doing wrong sides together on this, and I'm going to measure from here to here. That's about 17 inches, but I'm going to cut my binding about 18 inches just so it overlaps a little bit. Pin it together and then trim any excess fabric that you can see. I'm going to attach the binding. I'm going to go from the back side because that's how I like to put my binding on, but you can put your binding on whatever you prefer. I'm going to put the raw edges of my binding and the two pieces of the fabric, and I'm going to overlap them a little bit so that there's enough room to sew, and I'm just going to pin them. I'm now going to take this to the sewing machine, and I'm going to stitch a 1/4 inch along the edge of the raw side. If you do not need to baste your stitches onto your triangle, then it's, this will be open. But I just did it because it's easier for some people. Press the binding, and then I'm going to fold it over and press again so that this is going to be nice and sturdy in here. And I'm going to use my clips to fold it over so it's got a nice binding on it. Now this is the part of the hood. Now I'm going to attach the hood to the towel, and I'm putting it at one corner, and I'm going to put some pins on both sides because I'm going to be sewing from the opposite side, but I want to make sure that my hood is secure. And I'm going to flip it over so it's on the opposite side. Now right where the hood is, and there's going to be a lot of bulk here, and it's even going to be bulkier once we put the binding on, so we've got to be careful when we're doing that. So I'm going to add a few more pins on this side to make sure that these corners stay down. And now I'm going to start my binding, but I'm not going to start at the edge. I'm going to have about a 10 to 12 inch tail on it. So I'm going to put it like this, and I'm going to start it here, and I'm going to stop it at about a 10 to 12 inch so we can combine it. So I'll take you over to the sewing machine and show you how it works. I'm going to start sewing the binding on. Again, I said I do it on the wrong side, which is probably not correct, but that's how I like to do it because I do not want to hand sew anything. I'm going to start sewing this. Remember, I put a pin for my start part, and I've got a tail that's about 8 or 10 inches long. I'm using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. When you get into where the hood is, that's where it's going to start getting bulky. Make sure you don't go over any pins. When you get to the corner, we're going to angle off and cut the thread. I'm stopping about 1/4 of an inch away from the edge here, and then I'm going to pivot at a corner and then go straight off. So now you can see this is starting to be what it's going to look like, and it's all on here. Again, this is really thick on this side here. Now we're going to do a miter corner. Because this has an angle here, I'm going to flip it up. So I've got a triangle here, and crease it with my fingers, and then right at the top of it I'm going to crease it again so it looks like it's a square. Now you can put a pin in it if you'd like to secure it. I'm going to start at 1/4 of an inch in and 1/4 of an inch out to start my sewing down. Again, we have a lot of bulk with the hood plus the blanket plus the binding. When I get to this corner, I'm going to angle off again. We're going to do the same thing with the miter corner here. Fold it so it's got a triangle, right like that, and crease it. Fold it back so you've got a square at the top. Again, you can put a pin in it. And I'm going to start the sewing right at the 1/4 inch. And we're going to do our last corner. Now, if you have rounded corners, you would not use a straight binding. You would do a bias, which is at an angle. So that's if you're using curves. But we're doing straight edges, so that's why we're doing the miter corners. On the last side, you just want to sew down about to where the pin is, which is about 10 or 12 inches down. Now this is the hardest part of this binding. We have this big gap here, and we need to connect these two pieces here. I'm going to lay the right side of the binding, the one that was the last one I sewed on, flat on the fabric here, or the blanket or the towel. I'm going to crease it, just a finger crease. And I have more binding that I actually need, but I'm going to crease it right at the stitch line here. Then you're going to fold it over to the stitch line on this side here. And you've got another fold right here. And then we're going to cut this straight off. Now you have your left side of the binding. I used my Fons and Porter tool, and I did a 2-inch measurement here. Cross this over, and I would just cut right at the 2-inch line. You can also take your measurement here, and this is the 2-inch, but we would go 1/4 inch less. So it'd be 1 3/4 inch that we would be marking off. And I'll show you how it works here. So here's the edge here. I'm putting my edge of my binding tool right there. Here's the 2-inch, but if I mark it right here, you'll see that the 2-inch is actually 1 3/4 on a regular ruler. So I'm going to go over this 2 inches, and I'm going to take a pair of the scissors, and I'm going to cut right at that 2-inch. Depends on the size of your binding is where you are going to cut. So I'm cutting at 2 inches straight. Okay, now this is going to be the tricky part. How are we going to attach these? We're going to open up the left side so it is right sides up. Side is going to be more trickier because what you have to do is you're going to open it up, but you're going to twist it, going under and then laying it flat like this. So using my tools, I'm going to first pin this edge. And you might have to scrunch up some of your fabric so you can, it works better. So you're going to pin this in like that. And we're going to make, just like we did when we were making the binding, line from this corner to this corner. I'm using my line that you've on the edge of it, and I'm going to connect those 2 lines here. And I'm going to sew that. We're going to take the pins out and see how it turns out. See if you can see how it just actually fits in perfect. Trim this 1/4 inch, iron it or press it flat. I'm now going to finish stitching across the edge. We have the binding put on. You trim at the corners before flipping it over because there's a lot of bulk into that. I'm going to use the iron to press it and then fold it back a little bit. Then let's put some clips in it. And I'm going to do this all around. When you get to the corner, you want to flatten it out, and we're going to move it so it has a miter corner here. You can see the angle of this. I have finished clipping the binding to all the sides. I have just completed sewing the binding on, and you can see I have sewn really close to the edge of the binding. I have this nice hood baby towel that took less than 2 hours to make, and it's a great gift. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. A day without sunshine is just an extra day for crafting.